Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. This is Jodi.
And I'm Eliot.
And before we get started, we should probably take a minute to thank our growing list of patrons that have decided to join our patron circle, which you can check out at patreon.com at SHMS podcast. But you knock us off there?
So first,
we knock us off there. Start us off there? I don't want to knock us off.
It's going to be a great show. As you can tell.
Got it all together today.
Yes, we do. So first, we want to thank our founding patron, Tom Loveland and Mind Over Machines, as well as the architecture firm of GWWO, Cat's Copy, Herbert and Ethel, Inc., and Mary Craft Staffing and HR Solutions.
You do that so well.
I'm getting more practice at it, but to be honest with you, the list is starting to, I'm just hearing things. I think the list is going to be getting longer.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a promise. I'm just glad you can do it without, I think if I did it, it would sound a little bit like a used car salesman.
No, this is my radio voice.
Oh, is that your radio voice?
That's my radio voice. Yes.
All right. So, as I understand, as we were bantering a bit before we got started, that you have a story that you want to tell.
I do. I have a story I want to tell.
So I just would like to point out that it's your third story in a row.
I was thinking about that. It is my third story in a row, and that could mean one of two things.
Okay.
One, it could mean that I just really like telling stories, which I do.
Yeah.
And the other, which I think is far more significant, is if you want to be able to tell your story, you have got to get better at rock, paper, scissors.
Noted. I will practice.
So you ready?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. So as you know, I've had bronchitis for a couple of days, and I went into a patient first. Actually, it wasn't even patient first, but it was one of those patient first like places. And after I filled out my forms and I was shown to the back, and the doctor came back, she asked me about symptoms, and then she said to me, "What do you think it is?" And I kind of looked at her and I said, "Well, I think it's bronchitis. What do you think it is?" She goes, "Well," she goes over the symptoms of bronchitis, and then she says, "Do you think it's pneumonia?" And again, I kind of looked at her and I was like, "I don't think it's pneumonia. I've had pneumonia. Do you think it's pneumonia?"
I'm kind of leaning on you for this one.
Yeah. And so she put the stethoscope on my chest, asked me to breathe in, whatever. And then she says, "No, I don't think it's pneumonia. And you're probably right. It probably is bronchitis. It could be viral, but do you just want a Z-Pack? Do you want the antibiotics?" And I said, yeah, I do. Because my thought was, yes, it may be viral, but if it's not, what's the harm of taking the Z-Pack? But here's the thing, and I find this as a lawyer as well. I think any professional does. There's a point when you don't really like the collaborative approach.
Right.
I want my doctor to be conversational.
Yeah.
To explain, I think it's Johnson syndrome.
And to take your thoughts and opinions into account.
Yes.
But not be relying on them, maybe.
Correct. And maybe have a conversation about the treatment and learn if I'm scared of a certain type of treatment or have concerns, and to allay those concerns or go a different way. That's fine. But I don't want the diagnosis to be a collaborative exercise.
Yeah.
I want my doctor in this case, but I find that as a lawyer, people want me to say, "This is what I think. This is what you have to do." Mm-hmm. And then we can talk about the different tactics.
You can argue about it even, but yes. You want a definitive opinion.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, the woman who cuts my hair, I stayed with her because I would just bounce around to whoever was available, wherever they were available. And I met this woman one time. I was like, I was thinking about maybe like some bangs. And she goes, "No." I said, "I'm sorry, what?" She goes, "No, with your face shape," she goes, "you would hate bangs. If you have something like bangs, they should either be like here or here." Like she was like, "With your face shape, you need like this cut here or whatever." And I literally felt like my blood pressure go down because I don't know hair. I don't know what I want. Like I can bring you in a picture of some celebrity, but maybe that hair just looks good on her. I don't even know if my hair will do that. So I love there's certain places where you want them to lead.
Yeah. And I think that if you're that person, if you're that professional, one of the most difficult things to figure out is when it's time to stop listening.
Yeah.
And do the thing that they came to you to do.
Yeah. Did you read When Breath Becomes Air?
No.
So it's a book by a neurosurgeon who then gets brain cancer.
Oh, okay.
And fascinating book, really, really lovely. But in it, his doctor specifically has that conversation with him of when do you want, because of course he is a doctor. So she's talking about it very collaboratively. He knows all these things. And she says, let me know when you just want me to be your doctor. And there are a couple places where he's like, I just need you to tell me what to do here. And so I think it was really, this thing we're talking about was really well articulated in that storyline. But I think this really plays for all leaders. I mean, I think you can really feel it in those intense kind of industries, like with lawyers and doctors and hairdressers. My God.
Lawyers, doctors, hairdressers. Yes.
The important things in life. But I think it's true for all leaders that nobody wants an authoritarian leader who tells them what to do without taking their opinion into account. But there is a unease when there isn't clear leadership, when somebody isn't saying, here's where we're going. Now let's debate it. Let's have a conversation, but that I know something that I'm guiding by.
Yeah. And the difficulty is knowing where that line is. So this is one of the things that struck me in one of the Steve Jobs biographies that I read. When he left Apple and he started something called Next, N-E-X-T computers, he went to a graphic designer to design the Next logo. Mm-hmm. And the graphic designer he went to was apparently some guru from the mountaintop. I mean, somebody who had incredible success. And it wasn't just some guy he found in the yellow pages. I mean, It was just the guy, at least according to Steve Jobs, it was the guy. So the graphic designer listened to Steve, understood what the name of the company was, and came back with a design. And if you've ever had any experience with graphic designers, chances are you remember those meetings where they roll out like 9 different logos in front of you and get an idea of what you want. And then they can tweak this one and they can take the top 3 and they can hone in on what you think works. But this person put out one logo in front of them. Colors, font.
Done.
Yeah. And Steve said, is that it? Where are the other logos? Why don't I have a choice? Maybe I want a different color. And the designer said, no, that's the color. So, well, maybe I just want a different expression of what we're trying to, no, that's the logo. And he took it, and that was the logo. Now, I'm not saying that every single profession, every single undertaking ends with dictating to the customer exactly what they want. Far from it. I'd never say that. But there are those times when you have to.
Mm-hmm. I think of that phrase, committed but not attached. And I think some of it comes with business maturity of knowing when you know something that they don't. I mean, when I first started facilitating, when somebody would say, oh, well, here are the 12 things we want to get, we want to accomplish this day. I'd say, okay, let's jump in. And then we'd all be shocked that we didn't get through all of them. Right. Now when someone says, here are the 12 things I want to facilitate in the day, I will very firmly and strongly say, we need to pick like the top 2 or 3, or, this one is going to take the whole morning and then we could do these other 5 in the afternoon, but that's it. I have a much clearer sense to confidently draw the lines, but I have to be listening to what's most important for them to be able to do that. I think that your ability to make firm lines like that is not mutually exclusive from the need to listen and collaborate. The more you can listen and take in their thoughts and understand what they really want and need, for me, the firmer I can be on what I think they really need. And then ultimately, if they're like, nope, we insist we want to do these 12 things, then it's my decision about whether or not I take that job, because I know we can't do all that in one day.
Yeah, I like the committed but not attached. And I have to focus on that more, because I think that's kind of a hallmark of so many conversations that have to take place. And I think it goes back to something that you've done before, which is divide the actual needs from the emotional attachment to those needs.
Yeah.
And try and figure out, well, Are you saying that this has to take place because it's absolutely vital that it does? Or because you're scared of what happens if it doesn't?
Right. Or because you guys all got together over lunch and made a list of all the things that'd be great to get to. Sometimes when I start asking them questions about why they want to do those things, there's actually some other issue, we've talked about this before, that we need to spend the whole day on that wasn't even on that list. But if you solve that issue, like half of these things go away.
There is a great difference, especially when you're talking about what has to happen and what has to happen to make me comfortable, the emotional versus the real, is the dynamic when you're dealing with one person, like that designer was dealing with Steve Jobs, who's going to make the decision, as opposed to a number of clients who might have different emotional needs or might be coming at this from different places. And I think that's a much more different facilitation to get to the bottom of.
Yeah, because we're talking about that committed but not attached to how the outcome comes out. And when you're dealing with a bunch of different people, they all have different needs and they all have different fears and they all have different thoughts. And so absolutely, it's a completely different animal then.
So how do you set the stage? I mean, it seems to me that when you've got a number of different personalities, and we've touched on this in a number of conversations, you have to have an underlying trust that it's like the Miranda warnings in reverse. What you say here will not be used against you in the future.
Right.
So if I say, I'm really not sure I can handle this. Mm-hmm. I'm really not sure that I have the skills to go here. I'm really not sure, period. That won't come back in a future conversation where the focus is, you know what? I thought you were the guy for us, but I'm really not sure.
Yeah, well, but that's the irony here. So I used the example of my hairdresser earlier. In her younger years of hairdressing, may have been hesitant to say, we don't do bangs, that it would sound like, well, I'm not sure I can give you bangs.
Right.
Versus bangs would look terrible on you and you would regret them in 3 days. For me, that was certainly the path I went. If I said we can't do 12 things today, in my mind, that sounds like I can't take us through 12 things today. And the more clear I got on why. So here's where the committed attached comes in. I'm committed to them getting what they want. I'm not attached to what that thing is, but I'm more committed to what they want and what they need, than them liking me. And that piece, if I can stay in that mindset of it, then we can have a conversation about what they really need. And I can help them see that before we move forward.
This might seem like a jump, but this is where I went to. In listening to the sum total of this conversation, I go back to when people ask me, what am I really looking for in a client? What really makes a client that I want, as opposed to somebody that I would say, you know what, we're not the right fit for you. And for me, the number one thing is that they have to be coachable. So what I'm not saying that I have all the answers, that they have to be lackeys, that they have to be people who, when I say jump, they ask how high.
In fact, you don't want that.
I don't want that. No. But I do want people who are committed but not attached. I want people who can be coachable, who, when they say we have these 12 priorities, which, by the way, is an oxymoron because the word priority comes from the Latin and it should be singular.
Right.
But we have these 12 priorities. And if I say, you know what, you're not going to accomplish these 12 priorities, the best move is from my experience, the best move is to do 3. They have to be coachable enough to be open to that conversation about the 3. Mm-hmm. Because if they're rigid in their adherence to the 12, they're not a fit for me.
Right. Yep.
So that's our story.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so grateful for everyone who's listening in, and we're especially grateful to all of our patrons who've joined us over at patreon.com to support our efforts here. And we hope to see you next week.
And listen, having told our story, we'd love to hear yours.
Ooh, yeah.
So I guess what we're trying to say is the floor is yours. Go to sohere'smystory.com and join the conversation.
Wait, before you go, there are 3 things that we really want you to know.
First, you can find show notes and links to all of the random things we happen to mention during the episode by visiting our website, sohere'smystory.com.
The second thing is we like to talk.
And not just to each other.
That's right. So what we really want to hear is your story. So while you're there, you'll also find links to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and other ways to contact us with questions, suggestions, or even to share your own story.
And if you love the show and want to support future episodes, you'll also find the link to our Patreon page, where we share our extra bonus content.
Or if you can't support us financially, it'd be great if you could leave us a 5-star review at iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever podcast service you use to listen to us. And be sure to tell all your friends.
Until next time.